I don't want to gloss over this because this is something that's very, 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 very important. So this is what I had heard. You had just said it there, but that there wasn't an actual high def, standard def feed that was going out to the networks. They were told by NASA to set up a camera and point the camera at a second generation projection screen, not even cathode ray, but a projection screen, some distorted, blown up image. And that is what we saw on television. That's what I saw on television live.
And then if you wanted to archive it, you would film that image off of a TV screen. And that was what most people archived.
Why would they do it that way? That doesn't even...
Well, because they were fake sets, and they wanted to make sure nobody figured it out. It was the first time they had faked it, and they didn't want to show too much detail. I mean, I think it was 1967 when Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, and Gilligan's Island went from black and white to color. So if you're really going to the moon for the first time, you know how the Olympics game have 4G TV,
sure,
or 20G, whatever the latest thing is that won't be out for 20 years.
Right.
They would have had color TV if they were really on the moon, high definition. But they chose to use the low definition black and white camera and make it suffer through 4 generations of copying before it went out because they were fake sets. And they wanted to make sure that too much detail was not revealed. They deliberately degraded the quality of the TV image. And then when Ron Howard, about 10 years ago, maybe a little less than that, did an IMAX 70-millimeter film about Apollo. I mean, the whole thing is about the Apollo missions. And if you put a stopwatch on it, only about 5% or less of the movie is actual footage from the Apollo missions. And most of that is reenactments. And sometimes the image is shrunk to like 20% of the potential screen, and you even see a VHS tracking line at the bottom because that was the only copy available of it. What had happened is Ron Howard, for the production of this film, went to NASA and asked for the original, I think they're called DLT tapes. They're like 2-inch digital videotapes, sort of. They're a digital transposition of an analog signal. And I would estimate there were probably 1 ton to 2 tons worth of these videotapes. There's only one machine that can, copy them over to high resolution, and he made that request. It had never been done before. And between the time of his request and 6 weeks later, they lost every single original videotape from the National Archives of the Apollo missions for the television images. Now, that's tons, 2 or 3 tons of videotapes lost from the National Archives. Now, we have a copy of the Declaration of Independence. It's more than 200 years old, and so we can't keep the originals. They're lost. And then just to make sure, they immediately disassembled and threw away the only machine that could ever read the tapes if they were ever found.
Wait. Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Have the tapes, okay, now, so have the tapes ever been recovered?
No, they've been lost for going on 10 years now.
And the machine that, even if they were found, the video playback, the digital machine that plays back that digital audio and video, it doesn't exist either.
No, they deliberately destroyed it so that if the tapes were found, they could never be. What we're talking about is a minimum of 4 times the resolution of the Apollo TV images that had ever been seen. Now, it's my opinion that there may have been 2 sets. There may have been a still picture set, which was of higher quality, for the high resolution 35 millimeter pictures they allegedly took on the moon, and a separate set, which was circular for television. They basically had a set about the size of maybe one of those fuel drums out at the airport. And in order to do a panoramic 360 degree field, they had the fake backdrop painted or projected around the inside. They had the landscape, going around. They lowered, the equipment by a crane and then put the astronauts in there. And because it was, not that high quality of a set, that's why they made it, 4 times generation for a copy of a copy 4 times. So we would see it at least 4 times, possibly more. with digital enhancements and things like that, you would see it at super, super duper resolution, and you would probably see the backdrop, the curvature of the landscape, and the
Sure.
and who knows what else.
Well, I had always thought, that the reason why it wasn't in color was a bandwidth issue. And the size of the cameras that would have to be up on the moon, they would be, just too big and oversized. That's the way my brain works, my tiny brain. And that was the get out of jail free card that they had on on that issue for me. But you raise a really good point that back then. But let me finish. That back then, I'm not cutting you off. I just want to get my thought out. But back then, color was a big deal. And I don't know if you were alive back then, but I was. And I remember when Gilligan's Island went from black and white to color. I remember when the Flintstones went from black and white to color. It was a big deal. And every network, that's why the NBC Peacock was multicolored. That's all they wanted to do was tout the latest and greatest thing, which was color television. And the greatest event of mankind being, landing on the moon, why wasn't that in color? And I always thought it was for different reasons. That's an amazing thought that you put out there, not only for me but for everybody else. I never considered it.
Yeah, just like if Buzz really went to the moon and I asked him to swear on a Bible and challenged him, he would find it funny. If they really went to the moon, Nixon himself would have been at the launch, but he didn't show up until like the fourth Apollo mission after he knew he could get away with faking it. And he didn't want to have a picture of him shaking the hands of the astronauts and the whole thing to unravel. And, of course, if they were really on the moon, they would have had a color camera, high resolution, to show off. Not only can we go to the moon, we can do it in color. We can do it in stereo. Look how great we are. You know what I mean? But it was the first time they faked it. So they had to be very careful the way that they faked it.
Now,
who knew they would get away with it? Now, they did get away with it, but it was risky. So they wanted to make sure the TV pictures weren't too high res to make sure they get away with fooling people.
There are so many facts that we're going to start to present here, and I want to start with one of the most fascinating ones before we get to the footage that you discovered and the overlays on the windows. We'll get to that because that needs a whole explanation, and that's going to take up a big chunk of the show. So before we get to that, do you have your computer up and running? Are you looking at your gallery?
I can.
Okay. Well, the photograph I want everybody to look at. So on the top row of the gallery, picture number 4 is labeled Armstrong 1. So everybody go right now, because this is a very, very, probably to me, one of the most important photographs ever taken for this evidence, and there's reasons for it. Now, this is, and now I'm hoping everybody is looking at the picture now. Actually, after they hear what you have to say about this picture, it's the only picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon. Now, why, when you consider that, this is the thing. When Buzz Aldrin, we think of his name, Gene Cernan, okay, there's other names, Michael Collins, there's other names that come to mind when you think about the original guys, that went up. We do. But the king is Neil Armstrong. He was first, he's the most famous, but also he's the one that we know nothing about. And you would have thought, just like you were saying now, with color pictures and the documentation of everything else, that we would have hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of Neil Armstrong on the moon. There's only one, and it's this one right here, isn't it?
Yeah. I went to the archives, and I said, find me a picture, a still picture. We're not talking about television. We're talking about still photography of Neil Armstrong on the moon. And they went through every single Apollo 11 picture, and to their own astonishment, There was not a picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon. This is actually taken from what's called an automatic sequence camera, which is a 16 millimeter camera that takes like one picture a second or something like that. And so this, theoretically isn't even a real still image. Now, the excuse is that Armstrong was taking the pictures, therefore he's not in them. But I would think if you're going to the moon for the first time and it's 250 degrees in the sun and minus 250 in the shade, which is a 500-degree difference, and there's micrometeorites and who knows what else, I think you might want to bring a backup camera just in case, you know what I mean? And so I would probably put a camera on each astronaut, but they chose not to do that. Now, I've studied Neil Armstrong, his background quite a bit and talked to people from his hometown. He was an extremely outgoing people person until he returned from the mission and totally changed his behavior. And he was the life of the party. He played the piano, and he was just everybody's friend and very outgoing personality. And everybody says he completely changed his demeanor when he came back from the moon and, refuses to be interviewed about it. His own neighbors didn't even know until I went there with the film crew who they lived next to. His own postman didn't even know who lived there. He says, yeah, I'm delivering to Neil Armstrong, but not the Neil Armstrong. I'm like, yeah. And
this is my point, and I want you to finish your thought, but this is dramatic. If we didn't have this picture here, and I'm talking about the United States, the world, if we, the world, didn't have this picture, that we've got nothing of Neil on the moon. That doesn't make any sense. And if you went to the moon, if I went to the moon, man, if I go to Disneyland, I'm going up to Mickey Mouse and getting my picture taken with Mickey Mouse. It's what you do. And he goes to the moon, and you're telling me, and I mean NASA is telling me that Neil didn't take any pictures. He didn't make sure that he wasn't shot next to the LM. He wasn't shot. Well, it just doesn't make any sense.
Here's why, in my opinion. The man prior to participating in this was a man of extremely high integrity. And I suspect that when they asked him to fake the moon landing, he wished them luck, but said he didn't want to have anything to do with it. Unfortunately, it was already chosen on the world stage through the media that he was going to be the guy. So if he resigned, people would start asking questions. Why are you going to resign? Are you chicken, or what's going on?
Of course.
So they would not let him resign. So if you ask a guy to do it and he says no, and then you bribe him with money, and then he says no, and then the guy has such integrity, there's nothing you can blackmail him for. You have to keep turning up the heat, you see. Now, if you threaten his life, you got to remember he's a test pilot, and he flies aircraft that has never been flown before, which is extremely dangerous. So I don't think if you threatened his life, that's going to mean a whole lot.
No, he stared death in the face. It was his job. Yeah, exactly.
So you have to turn up the heat more. And what is left? You threaten the life of his wife and of his children. Then you get his cooperation. If the secret tape I found, if someone said, hey, we're going to kill your son unless you give it back to us, Bart, I would say, here it is.
Right.
And that's what he did. He said, I'll do it to protect my family. But he didn't want to have anything to do with it afterwards. That's why he looked so unhappy at the one press conference. That's why he seldom gave interviews about it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. And he made sure that he did not have his picture taken during it because he found it disgusting. And I think he also might have considered it some form of protection of liability as well. I pointed out to him, there's a plaque that he signed his name to saying he did walk on the moon.
One of the things that is very stunning in your documentary, and there's a lot of it there. By the way, who does the narration? What's her name?
Her name is Ann Tonelson. Again, if your listeners go to Sibrel, Sibrel.com, and then go to the YouTube link, it's one of the films on there. and then can watch it. It's only like 45 minutes long.
Yeah.
And
Well, the link, they just have to click on your name, Bart. It's a new technology. Yeah. It's called a hyperlink. It's going to be the next big thing. Yeah, it's going to be the next big thing on the internet. But she does a really great job in the narration. She's really, really, really good. I wish I would have been able to narrate it, but you know what? You pick second best. She's amazing. She does such a great job. So anyway, when she explained, when the part, it's one of the most astounding parts of the documentary is the initial press conference when they're sitting there. Not one of those three, not one, was happy. Not one of they look like, and especially Neil Armstrong. And you don't think about it because your memory's clouded, and you don't go back and study these things. And until YouTube and modern internet, you didn't have a way to just go back and look at that footage again, or would you have a reason to? But if you go back now, with this mindset, and you go back and you look at Neil Armstrong, it looks like somebody put a gun to his head and forced him out on that stage. He did not want to be there. He did not want to answer the questions. He wanted to get out of there, and he wanted to move on with it. You could just tell that he was disconnected. Instead of, where's the enthusiasm? When you see the shuttle pilots come back, everybody is jacked up and happy and want to talk and what was it like and weightless this and love that and this. You know what I mean? But that press conference is depression central. And I'm not wrong, am I?
No. 4 out of 5 people who watch A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, who previously thought the moon landings were real, reversed their opinion, of about 2,000 people that we polled. And of that group who now believe we did not go, asked them, well, what's the most significant piece of evidence? 4 out of 5 say that new footage that I uncovered that shows them faking a shot right in front of your eyes. But 1 out of 5 of those say their expressions during the press conference.
Right.
They literally look like they're at a funeral of their only son.
Yes. Yeah. And Buzz
none of them wants to talk. They keep passing the buck.
Yep.
They just look like the most sour, depressed, because they're telling this huge lie.
They're lying. Yes.
Of their own character. They know it's bad. They know they're doing wrong. They know they shouldn't be doing it. They know it's a disgusting thing to be doing. They know it while they're doing it, and you can see it so clearly.
I should have today. I should have pulled some stills from that press conference, and I was very busy. But everybody else here, working on the show, the one thing that we're talking about now that was so astounding, I didn't get to it. But again, everybody, just the links are up to go to Bart's site, and you can check it out, and go to YouTube and check it out for yourself. And when you get to that press conference, you will remember, after hearing Bart and I talk about it, trust me on this, it's going to freak you out. Well, look at Buzz Aldrin, how he's looking down at the table and he's flipping through paper and he's just so disconnected. He's not listening to the questions. And that whole, did you see stars sequence? And you look at everybody kind of look at each other like they needed to keep their story straight. And you know what's funny? And again, I could be way wrong, but it was just like, what do we say when they ask us about the stars? You say you didn't see stars. And well, that's your answer.
Here's something I noticed about the press conference.
Hey, Bart, we got a couple calls coming in. You want to take a quick live call?
Let me say one. Yeah, we'll do that. Let me say one last thing about the press conference.
Okay.
I edited a DVD of it, of just the press conference from the two angles. I spent 100 hours on it, and like at about hour 80, I noticed something. So I'm a filmmaker, I'm an editor, and after 80 hours, I finally saw something that was there in front of me all along, which was they have teleprompters kind of recessed into their desk they're sitting at to prompt them with answers. Now, if these are the only people who have been to the moon on the entire planet, why do they need to be prompted to give answers about an experience that is only belongs to them?
And only they, not only belongs to them, but we want to hear it. We want to hear their color commentary. All right,
They were being prompted with the teleprompter and what to say secretly.
let's grab this call really quick. Hello, caller. You're live on the air right now with Bart Sibrel.